I actually went in really not wanting to like him because, just a 26-year-old quarterback prospect, his injury history. But then you watch the film a little bit and you can see the NFL stuff. He has, other than Cam Ward, to me, the best arm in this class.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a Wisdom Wednesday, the day before the 2025 NFL Draft, presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Here's the deal before I forget. We've got Derrik Klassen on the show. Does a terrific job breaking down the video, including the quarterback, kind of a young Greg Cosell, if you will. We'll get to Derrik momentarily. Tomorrow night, anybody within an hour of Third and Spruce Cafe in West Reading, Pennsylvania, hope to be able to meet you guys in person. I'll be there from like 7:30 until the Eagles pick. So if you can stop by at any point, it'd be great to meet you. Why am I telling everybody that? Because that's going to impact when we record the final Ross Tucker Football Podcast this week. It's either going to be late Thursday night after the first round. Jack and I will get that up and posted ASAP, or we'll do it bright and early on Friday morning. So obviously we're going to wait till after the first round for the last Ross Tucker Football Podcast this week. There is some news with some contracts and some draft news to get to in a little bit as well. But first, it's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
All right, I had to get at least one more of these quarterback gurus on the show before the draft. Interesting, by the way, on the Fantasy Feast Even Money simulcast, that there's some thought that maybe only one quarterback goes in the first round in terms of the draft prop bets. If you didn't get a chance to check out that episode, make sure you do so. It was awesome. I've had a chance to admire this guy for a long time. His name's Derrik Klassen. From afar, though. Never met him. Nothing, just knew about him. I've seen people repost his stuff on social media. You can check him out at QB Class, whatever you're on, Blue Sky or X. He's one of the co-hosts of the Athletic Football Show with Robert Mays. Those guys do an outstanding job, and they have for a long time. So, Derrik, it's funny because, like I said, I've seen the handle. It's funny, nowadays, like, you see the handle before you see the person, and you kind of follow their work that way. What is your background, Derrik, that you got to this point? Give my listeners and the people checking us out on YouTube kind of who you are and how you got here.
First of all, thanks for being here. It's a blast to be on this show. I'm surprised we haven't met at the Combine or Super Bowl or one of those events. It's kind of crazy that we've both been around for so long and that hasn't happened. But my background is honestly, it's pretty simple. I was in high school. I think it was maybe my sophomore or junior year. I had stopped playing soccer that year, but I'd always loved football. Obviously, growing up, it was my favorite sport. And I was like, you know what? What if I just watch some draft prospects and kind of just see if anybody would let me write for free? And it really just snowballed from there. 3 years later, somebody started paying me a little bit of money to do it. And then 3 years later, I was like, wait, I could make a career out of this. By the time I got to college, I was like, you know what? I don't even need to go finish my degree. I'm just going to straight up, just go do the work. And thankfully, I've been very blessed that it's all worked out. And, I'm here on this show.
That is incredible. All right, so for The Athletic, in addition to the podcast, I'm assuming you write for them also?
A little bit, like once a week. Typically during the season, I was doing a little bit of a grab bag, just kind of like 4 topics I thought were super interesting from that week. One stat-based thing, one film-based thing, maybe one narrative-based thing, that sort of deal. But otherwise, it's mostly the podcast that we do. My how many times I'm on a week varies, but it's at least 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, depending on how crazy the week is. Like free agency, I think I was on like every single day.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, so I want to start with the quarterbacks and maybe finish with them. I don't know, since I know that's in your social handle at QB Class. I don't like to assume anything, so I guess I'll start with, who is your number one quarterback for tomorrow night's draft, and why?
It's the boring answer, but to me it is Cam Ward. And I kind of liked Cam Ward coming into the season a little bit. Not, I didn't expect him to be the first overall pick, but to me he was a guy who was a really good like top 50 caliber prospect. And then if he continued to take the steps that he's taken at every point in his career, right? He went from wing T quarterback in high school, leveled up to Incarnate Word, leveled up again to Washington State, and then obviously we saw him level up at Miami. So just between I think getting better is an ability. It's a skill, and the fact that he's shown that while having, B plus, A minus level arm talent, he's a pretty good athlete, and he has my favorite trait in a quarterback, which is he is not scared of any throw on the field. Sometimes that's to his detriment, right? He'll throw a pick that looks a little bit silly every now and then. But I think if you look at all the best quarterbacks, the Josh Allens, Lamar Jacksons, Matthew Staffords, Patrick Mahomes, there's no throw that scares them, and I really appreciate that about Cam Ward's game. So I think he's actually gotten a little bit underrated because last year's class was so good, and this year's class as a whole has not been as well received. But I think Cam individually is a pretty dang good quarterback.
So that actually answered one of my questions that I didn't know, and I've been waiting to ask somebody about how he ended up going to Incarnate Word in the first place. My high school, very famously, I guess if you're in Pennsylvania, and I'll be back there tomorrow night doing an NFL draft watch party in my hometown, but we run the wing T, Derek,
to this
and it
day.
is very, very different. It's not ideal for offensive linemen in terms of pass blocking or quarterbacks. Ironically, we have had an NFL quarterback and an NFL lineman in me. The current guy is Alex Anzalone. He's from our high school in Wyomissing. But is that why Cam Ward went to Incarnate Word? Because I've been struggling to comprehend how someone with the ability to be the number one pick in the NFL draft started his career at Incarnate Word.
Yeah, he just wasn't really much of a passer at the high school level. Because like you said, at least when you go into college, you kind of get to pick the scheme that you're going to play in. You're getting recruited by all these teams, and you know what they're going to do going in. High school, it's just, it's where you live. And if that's the closest high school and you got to run the wing T, then that's what we got to run. And so that's kind of why Ward, even a guy of his talent, just wasn't throwing a whole lot in high school. So it was hard for teams to understand what he was going to be. He's also not the biggest guy, right? He's not super short at 6'2", but he doesn't have that prototypical 6'5", 230-pound frame that you see from a lot of other top 5 picks, like the Anthony Richardsons and stuff like that. So I think him being slightly on the smaller side and then him just kind of being more of a wing T guy in high school, it's hard to get recruited to some of those, D1 programs like in Miami until you have to play at 4 other schools before you finally land there.
I just love that for him in an NFL career, the mindset that he's had, and what he's already accomplished, that speaks very, very well of him. You know how hard it is to go from Incarnate Word to the number one pick in the draft? He has absolutely earned it. All right, Derek, who is QB? This seems to be the more interesting question nowadays, is who is QB2 for you?
It is a trickier question, and I think the more I watch these guys, there were some guys that got in contention for me. I think it's still Shedeur Sanders. I'm not the biggest fan. To me, he is probably not a first-round caliber prospect. He is, to me, a quarterback that we used to see go in the second round a lot. The Jimmy Garoppolo's, the Andy Dalton, the Derek Carr, that caliber of prospect where he's not special, but you think that you can get a starting caliber quarterback out of this. Maybe once or twice he makes the Pro Bowl, but you're not... it doesn't feel like a surefire thing. I think to me that is the caliber that we're looking at with Sanders, because I think usually with first-round prospects, they have some sort of athletic trait or physical trait that you can hang your hat on, right? And while Shedeur Sanders, I think, is a fairly smart quarterback, he's unbelievably tough. I mean, he will take a shot, and he certainly took a lot of them behind that offensive line. So I think he has the toughness, the accuracy, and the baseline level IQ to be a starting quarterback. I just don't see super high-level arm talent. He's an okay athlete. He's not that explosive, but he actually stride out fairly well. So I think, in terms of getting, picking up runs, he can actually be fairly decent there. But to me, he is more in that I expect him to be quarterback, 16 to 20 in the NFL. And to me, that's more of a quarterback you take at the top of the second round. But he is still my quarterback 2 in this class.
So what I do think is interesting about that is like the guys that you mentioned, Jimmy G, Derek Carr, Andy Dalton. I think like if you knew that you were going to get a guy like that, I think the Saints would take him. I think the Steelers would take him. You know, you're talking about a top half of the league starting quarterback. Those are very, very, very valuable. I know what you're saying. I just think that part of it's interesting because we look at it that way and you're like, yeah, Andy Dalton, Derek Carr. I mean, there's teams that would do anything for like prime Andy Dalton or prime Derek Carr right now.
That is a good point. You know, if the Steelers, what was it, 3 years ago, if Kenny Pickett turned into exactly what Andy Dalton was, they would be in a much happier place as a franchise. So that is a good point. It's just for me, it's like a risk assessment thing. I think when you're taking a first round quarterback, there really does need to be some level of upside that, 3 years down the line, there is no question that this is a guy that we want to continue to roll with. With Sanders, I struggle to see that a little bit more. So I would almost like what the Bengals did, where they were able to take A.J. Green in the top 5 and then land a Shedeur Sanders a little bit later in the draft. That to me is like the ideal scenario for him. But kind of like you're mentioning, we don't really live in a world where quarterbacks fall to the second round anymore. If teams think that he can be a starting quarterback, he's probably going to go in the first at some point.
Yeah, and maybe the Giants do what you just said. Maybe they take Abdul Carter at 3 overall and then hope that he's still there or someone else is still there at the top of round 2. All right, what about the next guy on the list, Derek, at the quarterback position in this draft?
This is a tricky one. I think this is when it certainly gets into, pick your flavor. For me, it's Tyler Shough, who I actually went in really not wanting to like him because, just a 26-year-old quarterback prospect, his injury history. Statistically, his final year at Louisville was nice, but it wasn't, that Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels, oh my God, even though he's an older prospect, this guy's incredible. But then you watch the film a little bit and you can see the NFL stuff. He has, other than Cam Ward, to me, the best arm in this class. I think he throws with really good velocity. He can change his arm angles, which I think is super important in today's NFL. He's a functional athlete, not special, but if teams want to, use him on boot, maybe every now and then in the red zone, he can be like a zone read threat. I think that's totally fine. And then I think you see baseline level processing. Like to me, when I watch some of these younger quarterbacks in this class, the Jaxson Darts, the Jalen Milroes, they make 3 or 4 decisions a game that it's really hard for me to wrap my head around, like how they even arrived there. At least with Tyler Shough, even though he can be a touch slow at times, I understand all his decisions. Why did he get to this check down? Okay, why did he pass over that route against this coverage? So he to me is just, I think, a pro quarterback. And again, I don't know the ceiling's that high, but if this is a guy you take, with the 62nd overall pick or something like that, I think you can get like quality starting quarterback play out of him.
It's interesting because I guess I've read or heard that there have been some people who said he's actually the number 1 quarterback on some boards, which I think is pretty fascinating when you hear that. And then there's also reports that there's some teams that don't have any of these quarterbacks with a first round grade. Some of these other guys that I want to get your take on that maybe we haven't talked as much about, sort of the other guys, Derek, whether it's Jaxson Dart, Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe, or Kyle McCord, or even I'll throw Will Howard in there as well.
So I'll start with Milroe because I actually kind of like him. His film has a lot of rough spots. He's more of a one-speed thrower where it's 100 miles an hour, and sometimes that's great, right? Like you can fit a window that other guys might not be able to. But if he's trying to put touch on a corner route, he doesn't really have that in the same way that a lot of other guys in this class will have. And I think his footwork can get pretty out of whack, especially the longer he has the ball. The further into his progression, I think it can get more out of whack. But I just see how talented his arm is, how quickly he can whip it. Like he has such a fast motion. It's almost like that Michael Vick flick of the wrist, like just level of arm talent. He's truly a special runner, like one of the most talented ball carriers I've ever seen at the position. And then I think I just, with the way that his teammates talk about him and the coaches talked about him, it just seems like he's one of those guys that would be nice to have in the locker room. And so even though I think he is more of like a 3rd round caliber prospect, I would want to bet on him in that range. After that, I think is where it starts to get harder for me to find guys I really love as starting caliber quarterback potential guys. Jaxson Dart to me is, my line with him in this class is the next, or yeah, the next great quarterback from one of those Lane Kiffin, Art Briles type offenses, they'll be the first one. And so I just struggle with that style of quarterback. The other one I actually kind of like in that range is Kyle McCord. He's definitely more of probably just a very high level backup, but he is the most, I think, in this class. If you just need to keep the train on the tracks and run the offense, I do think that Kyle McCord can give you that.
So the thing I think is fascinating, I did a Ole Miss game against Bama a couple years ago for CBS. I thought Jaxson Dart was fine in that game. Last year, Derek, I'm watching the end of that Ole Miss Florida game.
Oh, okay?
No. And it is the most important game for Ole Miss in, I don't know, 20 years, 30 years. I mean, if they win the game, they're going to be in the college football playoff, and they're playing a Florida team that's not that good. And he couldn't have played worse. I mean, I had no idea what he was doing, but he couldn't have possibly played worse, to the point where, you know, everything on social media was like, he threw the game. You know what I mean? Like, what's he doing? He got paid off. He threw the game. That would be really tough for me. And we all have our moments. We all have ups and downs in life. But when it was the single biggest moment for Jaxson Dart's football career, for his program, he played about as bad as you could possibly play. I haven't heard him. I would love to just hear like an explanation for what happened there.
So would I, because what's frustrating is he was actually, that was one of his better games for the first like 3 quarters. You know, he made some really impressive throws early in that game. He had an awesome, I think, corner route throw down the left side that he throws pretty early while he's taking a shot. So you could see the good stuff in his game earlier in that match. But then, like you said, in that fourth quarter, he just kind of fell apart. And losing isn't a crime. You know, all of these guys are going to lose games one way or another. It's that, like you said, it just seemed like he had no ability to put up in a fight there. Like, he just kind of went into full scrambled egg mode in his brain. And that to me is just, you know, to bring this a little bit back to Cam Ward, what I appreciate about Cam Ward is that even though he'll dig himself into a hole every now and then, he has an unbelievable ability to, all right, we're down 7 points in the fourth quarter. I'm going to get us back in this and we're going to win the game. And he did that time and time again. Whereas with Dart, like you said, in the biggest moment right there, it just fell apart in a way that, even if it's unfair, it's hard to get that taste out of your mouth.
Yeah. I think, you know, the one guy we didn't hear you talk about yet, and I might get back to McCord or I might ask about Will Howard, but Quinn Ewers from Texas is an interesting one, especially when you consider how much NIL money he was reportedly being offered to go to Oregon or elsewhere. He elects to go pro, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll let you tell me what you think of Quinn.
He's a fascinating prospect in this class. I've struggled with Quinn Ewers for a while now. You know, going into this season, I think that he had a lot of fans because it was a pretty wide open draft class, looking like it going into the summer. And I think a lot of people really loved him as a prospect. I thought he was a little bit more of, okay, you know, he's slightly undersized for these guys that typically go in the first round. His arm is more okay than anything. And then obviously this year, I think it was even worse because he battled through some injuries that he was having to throw through, which is going to hurt any guy's arm strength. He's actually a good athlete. That's actually one of the things that I do appreciate about his game. He can really bounce around a lot and go make some plays. I think my biggest contention with Quinn Ewers when I watched him both last year and this year was in the pocket, he can just get really antsy. You know, I think when things speed up for him, he just doesn't quite know, all right, where's my outlet in the pocket? Where's my pocket of green grass that I can kind of step into and make a throw? I think he just, you know, things speed up for him a little bit too fast. And with a guy who's played so much, you would think he would be a little bit better by now. So he's fairly talented. But to me, I just think if every single thing went right for him, you're looking at, you know, maybe Baker Mayfield. It's just, I think, you know, that to me is more a quarterback that if that's what it takes for every single thing to go right, if things fall out for him, I just think he's more of like a backup quarterback. So I've struggled with Ewers a bit, but, you know, by the time day 3 rolls around, I could get it.
Curious, Derek, to get your thoughts on Will Howard from Ohio State, especially after everything we saw, you know, during the college football playoff.
Howard is an interesting case for a different reason. He is a guy who, when he was at Kansas State the year before, I kind of liked him as, a fifth round pick where it's just, all right, he's got the size. He's a really good athlete for a guy who's that big. Powerful runner, but he's got a little bit more quickness than you would think. He's got some decent long speed. His arm is actually, funny enough, not quite as dangerous as you would think for a guy that big, but he's fairly accurate, especially I think when he's throwing towards the outside. That's really where I think you see some more of his consistency. To me, he's not actually that different of a player from when he was at Kansas State. It's just that when you get to play with, Jeremiah Smith, a couple of NFL offensive linemen, it's a little bit easier to look elevated. The thing I will say, and I appreciate about Howard, and I appreciate this about Cam Ward, is obviously we saw Cam Ward level up throughout his career. With Howard, the fact that he really leveled up from, taking this opportunity at Ohio State, and then in the playoffs, just really taking it to the next level and playing his best ball at the best moment. I do think that kind of speaks to, the opposite of what we just talked with Dart, where in his biggest moment, he kind of fell a little bit. The fact that Howard really stepped up for his team when they needed him to, I do think was pretty impressive. So he, to me, is still, probably a fourth round pick, but I do think for a guy his size, that good of athlete, that's a good bet to make it that range.
Derrik, I've asked you primarily, obviously, about quarterbacks, but I'm going to give you the floor, okay? Pretend I'm the GM and you're the scout. Any other player in this draft? Give me one other player in this draft that you're like, oh my gosh, this is my dude. I love him, and here's why.
All right, my sell is, and this might sound crazy, I think purely on film and just the athletic profile and all that stuff, I think Jahad Campbell, the linebacker from Alabama, is a top 5 player in this draft. I just think he is unbelievable. We just don't make linebackers like this. A guy who is like 6'4", 235 probably. He's a former defensive end, and when he takes on blocks, you can see some of that. He's got these long arms. He can really just jam people and shock them. His ability to run to the perimeter is phenomenal. And then to me, what really sold me is for a guy who's a former defensive end in high school, his ability to actually move backwards in coverage and really understand what's around him, it's really, really good for a guy who's barely played the position. So I just see phenomenal potential for a guy of that size and athletic ability.
Absolutely love it. I love that. I like that. A top 5 player in the draft. I like that your sell. That's a good way to describe it too. Check him out on social media, whatever platforms you're on, at QB Class. Derrik Klassen from the Athletic Football Show, another one of the good daily podcasts out there. Derrik, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This was a great time.
I know you're all listening because you want to hear what I think of your team's first round pick. You know who I think is really the best pick in the draft? Your mom or your wife or your grandma. I cannot highly recommend enough going all out for Mother's Day. They deserve it. And right now, when you order a dozen roses, they will double it to 2 dozen free at 1-800flowers.com. There's a reason why I've been teaming up with them for Valentine's Day and Mother's Day forever. To claim your double your roses offer, go to 1-800flowers.com/Ross. That's 1-800flowers.com/Ross. Get it done. Get it while they have this deal. Get it while they have this amazing double the roses. Are you kidding me? Why not? Talk about an incredible deal. We are almost there. Almost time for the number 1 overall pick with the NFL draft. How about Smirnoff? That's been my number 1 overall pick for vodka for a long time because it's perfect for crafting delicious cocktails. I'm big into like Smirnoff and like any type of recovery drink, like hydration drink, any type of mixture like that. That's been big for me these days. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please not share with anyone under legal drinking age. It is the world's number 1 vodka. It's an official vodka partner of the NFL, and there is no debate. It's my number 1 draft pick when it comes to vodka.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross, the biggest news, the Eagles, they give Cam Jurgens a 4-year, $68 million deal, making him the second highest paid center in the league.
A lot of thoughts on this. Number 1, thrilled for Cam, both professionally and personally. It's about $40 million guaranteed. Incredibly life-changing for that young man. Couldn't be happier for him as a player or as a person. I've gotten to know him a little bit. Candidly, I might have waited a little bit if I were the Eagles. I had a major back surgery. Cam just had a back surgery. I didn't feel like I was ever quite the same player. Now, Cam's obviously a lot better than I was and all that stuff, and this is encouraging. He says he feels like a new man, but it talks a lot about the faith that the Eagles have in him as a player and in the medical team to give this to him after that back surgery. But this is how the Eagles do it, right? He had 1 year left on his rookie deal. So now they can spread that $68 million out over 5 years instead of 4, which helps the cap tremendously. There are a bunch of teams out there that could learn a thing or two from the Eagles.
The Jets, they announced they were going to pick up the fifth-year options for Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, and Jermaine Johnson.
All well-deserved. That was a fantastic draft, by the way, by Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh. They had a bunch of first-round picks. They nailed them. We will be getting to more of the fifth-round options next week. I think they're due maybe usually May 3rd. Some teams announce them this week. Some teams wait until after this week's draft.
Speaking of the draft, the Titans, they do announce they will officially select at number 1 overall and will not trade the pick.
And I replied to Adam Schefter on Twitter and Instagram and said, they're going to take Cam Ward. You heard it here first. The amount of people that don't get my sarcasm is hilarious. We all know they're taking Cam Ward. People are like, oh, Captain Obvious. Oh, good call there. It's a joke. And so are you for not realizing that it's a joke. At Ross Tucker NFL, by the way.
Kirk Cousins is reporting to the Falcons' offseason program.
Right, and I think that's interesting on multiple levels. Number one, if the Falcons want to keep him, then they got to deal with him being around, whether they want him to be around or not, with Penix, the new starter. Plus, if your Cousins, if he gets hurt away from the facility, he doesn't get that $27.5 million fully guaranteed, right? It could be a non-football injury. So if he's going to work out, he's going to work out at that facility where he is financially protected. Other than that, I think we're done here. Thursday night, 3rd and Spruce. It's the Labatt Light Watch Party. I cannot wait. Talk about getting cool stuff for what I was going to be doing anyway. Watching the draft, drinking beer. That's what you guys can do with Buy Beer, Get Gear from Labatt. Head to the website, snap a photo of your receipt, upload it instantly to rack up points for exclusive merch. Hopefully I'll see a bunch of you 3rd and Spruce in Reading Thursday night for the first round of the draft. I will be drinking Labatt or Labatt Blue Light. I haven't decided. Maybe I'll alternate. Buy beer, get gear. Go to rewards.labattusa.com to sign up.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. Oh, baby, it is Mother's Day season. Got some flowers for my wife already. You could do that. I'll be telling you about that on Friday or Thursday night. But myfrontpagestory.com, absolutely the best gift for any mom, grandmother, anyone I've ever seen. Myfrontpagestory.com. Backofficescheduler.com, humanheadnyc.com, Sporticulture, Pizza Boy Brewing.